The air inside the cabin was dry, recycled, and smelled faintly of coffee and stale perfume, a scent that usually comforted me but today felt suffocating. I was 37 weeks pregnant, sitting in seat 14C, trying to convince myself that this flight from Chicago to Seattle was a good idea. My doctor had cleared me, barely, with a warning glance that lingered a second too long, but I had needed to move. I needed to be closer to my sister, who lived in Bellevue, because the solitude of my apartment in the city had begun to feel less like independence and more like isolation. I remember looking out the window at the tarmac, watching the ground crew in their neon vests, thinking about how small we all looked from up there, how insignificant our problems seemed against the vast gray sky. I didn't know then that my problems were about to become incredibly specific, incredibly loud, and intimately tied to the man sitting 2 rows ahead of me. The turbulence started as a gentle shudder, the kind you ignore, but then it deepened into a rhythmic shaking that rattled the tray table in front of me. I gripped the armrests, my knuckles turning white, and took a breath that hitched in my throat. It wasn't fear of flying. It was something lower, tighter, a contraction that rolled through my abdomen like a wave of hot iron. I checked my watch. Too early? It had to be too early. I told myself it was Braxton Hicks, just practice, just my body preparing, but the second one came 5 minutes later, sharper, demanding attention. I tried to stand, to walk to the lavatory, to do anything to normalize the situation, but my legs felt heavy, disconnected from my will. The flight attendant noticed first, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Sarah. She asked if I was okay, and I lied. I said I was fine, just uncomfortable. I didn't want to be the passenger who caused a diversion. I didn't want to be the burden. But the third contraction hit as the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, and I knew, with a cold clarity that settled over me, that this baby was not waiting for Seattle. I pressed the call button, and when Sarah arrived, I whispered that I thought I was in labor. Her demeanor changed instantly, professional calm masking the urgency. She asked how far apart they were, and when I told her, she moved into action. They cleared the row behind me. They asked if there was a doctor on board. There wasn't. A nurse? No. Then a voice spoke up from 2 rows ahead, a man's voice, steady and low. He said he wasn't a doctor, but he had training. He stood up, and I saw him walk down the aisle. He was tall, wearing a dark sweater that looked expensive but understated, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that looked strong, capable. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man who was simply assessing a problem that needed solving. He introduced himself as Elias. He didn't offer a last name. He asked Sarah for towels, hot water, anything they could spare. He knelt beside my seat, and his eyes met mine. They were gray, focused, devoid of panic. He told me to breathe with him, and I did. In that cramped space, with the hum of the engines vibrating through the floor, I surrendered control. I had spent my entire life controlling everything, my career, my finances, my emotions, but here, suspended over the Midwest, I had to let go. He guided me through the pain, his voice a constant anchor. He didn't treat me like a patient. He treated me like a partner in this crisis. When the baby came, it was quick, sudden, a rush of relief and terror all at once. The cry was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, piercing the cabin silence. Elias handled the cord. He wrapped the baby in the warm towels Sarah brought, and he placed him on my chest. I remember looking down at my son, then up at Elias, who was wiping his hands on a towel, a faint smile touching his lips. He looked tired. We were all tired. The pilot announced we would be landing in Cleveland for a medical meet, but in that moment, none of that mattered. There was only the baby, the man who had helped bring him into the world, and the profound silence that follows a storm. Elias stayed with me until the paramedics boarded. He didn't leave my side. He checked the baby's breathing, he made sure I was stable, and when the stretcher came, he walked alongside us to the gate. In the chaos of the disembarkation, the flashing lights, the questions from the ground staff, he was a quiet constant. At the ambulance, just before they loaded me in, I asked for his number. I needed to thank him. I needed to know that he was real. He wrote it on a napkin, his handwriting sharp and clear. He told me to focus on the baby, that the thanks could wait. Then he stepped back, disappearing into the crowd of onlookers and airport personnel. I didn't know his last name. I didn't know that he owned half the skyline of the city I was flying to. I didn't know that the man who had caught my son was one of the most powerful men in the country. I just knew he was kind. The hospital in Cleveland was efficient, sterile, and loud. My sister arrived 6 hours later, frantic, her face pale with worry that melted into relief when she saw the baby. We spent 3 days there, running tests, ensuring everything was perfect. In the quiet moments when the nurses left and my sister was sleeping in the chair, I took out the napkin. It was stained with a drop of coffee from the plane, the numbers written in black ink. I typed them into my phone but didn't call. I wasn't ready. I was too raw, too overwhelmed by the sudden shift from independent woman to mother. But I thought about him. I thought about the way his hands had been so gentle, the way he had commanded the space without raising his voice. There was a competence to him that I found rare in men. Usually, men tried to fix things with words or with money. He had fixed things with presence. When we were cleared to fly to Seattle, I booked the tickets again. I told myself I would call him once we were settled. Once I was back on solid ground. We landed in Seattle without incident. My sister's house was warm, filled with the smell of lavender and baby powder. For a week, life was a blur of feeding schedules and sleep deprivation. I was functioning on autopilot, my mind foggy. It wasn't until the second week, when I finally had a moment of solitude while the baby slept, that I picked up my phone again. I looked at the number. I decided to send a text. Just a simple thank you. I wrote that the baby was healthy, that we were home, and that I owed him everything. I hit send before I could overthink it. He replied within minutes. He said he was glad to hear it, that he had been thinking about us. He asked if I needed anything, resources, support. I said no, that we were fine. We exchanged a few more messages over the next few days. They were polite, guarded, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity. He asked about the baby's name. I told him Leo. He said it was a strong name. I asked about him, where he was from. He said he traveled often, that he was based in Seattle but spent a lot of time away. I assumed he was a consultant, maybe in logistics or management, given his calm under pressure. I didn't pry. I had learned long ago that prying invited complications. I was 37, single, and I had built a life where I didn't need to depend on anyone. I was wary of men who offered too much too soon, but Elias was different. He didn't push, he didn't ask to come over, he just checked in. It felt safe. It felt human. Then, 3 weeks after the flight, I made the mistake of mentioning the incident to my sister. She was holding Leo, bouncing him gently on her knee, when I told her about the man on the plane. I described him. Tall, dark hair, gray eyes, calm voice. I showed her the text thread. She looked at the phone, then at me, her eyebrows raising. She asked for his name. I said I only knew Elias. She laughed, a short, incredulous sound. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. She took her phone out and typed something. She turned the screen toward me. It was a news article. The headline read, "Thorne Industries CEO diverts private jet due to mechanical failure, takes commercial flight." The picture was him, Elias Thorne. The date of the article was the day of my flight. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew the name Thorne. Everyone in the Pacific Northwest knew the name Thorne. They owned real estate, tech startups, hospitality groups. They were old money, new power, the kind of family that influenced city councils and charity galas. I stared at the photo. It was definitely him. The same sweater, the same eyes, but the context had shifted violently. He wasn't just a traveler. He was a billionaire, and he had been on a commercial flight. Why? The article said mechanical failure with his private jet. But my mind, trained to look for angles, trained by years of navigating a corporate world where nothing was free, began to spin. Why would a man like that be on a crowded economy plane? Why would he help a stranger? Was it a publicity stunt? Did he know who I was? Did he have some ulterior motive? The safety I had felt, the warmth of that moment on the plane, suddenly felt cold. It felt calculated. I put the phone down. I told my sister I needed a moment. I went to the guest room and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. They were still shaking slightly from the labor, from the hormones, but now they were shaking from something else. Betrayal. Not because he was rich, but because he had hidden it. If he was who he was, why the anonymity? Why the napkin? Why not just have his assistant handle it? The narrative in my head changed. The kind stranger became a manipulator. Maybe he wanted a story. Maybe he wanted to feel like a hero. Maybe he was looking for something from me that I couldn't give. I decided then that I would not be a footnote in his biography. I would not be the pregnant lady on the plane who got lucky. I stopped texting him. I left his messages on read. I needed space to think. I needed to understand the truth before I engaged again. Because if there was one thing I valued more than kindness, it was authenticity. And I suspected that Elias Thorne was many things, but authenticity was not one of them. The silence stretched for 2 weeks. He sent 3 messages. The first asked if everything was okay. The second said he understood if I was busy. The third simply said, "I hope Leo is sleeping well." He didn't demand an explanation. He didn't get angry. That annoyed me even more. It felt like patience born of power, the knowledge that he could wait me out. I started researching him. I read every article I could find. I looked at his interviews. He was portrayed as brilliant, ruthless in business, but philanthropic. He funded hospitals. He funded education. There was no scandal, no rumors of inappropriate behavior. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. I needed evidence. I needed to know if the flight was truly a coincidence. I called the airline. I told them I was a passenger on that flight, that I wanted to send a formal complaint about the lack of medical support, hoping it would trigger a record check. The customer service representative was helpful. She pulled up the manifest. She told me that there had been a note in the system about a high-profile passenger requesting privacy. She couldn't give me the name, but she confirmed the seat number. It matched. She also mentioned that the private jet diversion was logged in the crew's briefing notes. It seemed legitimate, but I needed more. I needed to know if he knew me before the flight. I hired a discreet background checker, a friend of a friend who worked in corporate security. I asked him to run a cross-reference. Did Elias Thorne have any connection to me? Did he know my name before seat 14C? The report came back 3 days later. Negative, no prior contact, no shared contacts, no searches on my name in his digital footprint. He was clean, but I still couldn't let go of the feeling that the power dynamic was skewed. I was a single mother with a modest savings account. He was Elias Thorne. If we continued talking, if this turned into anything more, I would always be the one with less. I would always be the one owing him. I remembered my father, how he had treated my mother, how money had been used as a lever to control her choices. I had sworn I would never be in that position, so I stayed away. I focused on Leo. I focused on my job, which I had returned to part-time. I tried to bury the memory of the plane. But you cannot bury a connection that begins with birth. It is too primal. I would look at Leo and see Elias' hands. I would hear his voice in my head when I was stressed. He had told me to breathe, and I realized I wasn't breathing. I was holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. One evening, about a month after the silence began, I was at a local charity gala. My sister had insisted I go, said I needed to get out of the house. I wore a simple blue dress, kept to the edges of the room. I was holding a glass of sparkling water, watching the crowd when I saw him. He was across the room, talking to the mayor. He looked different in a suit, sharper, more imposing. But then he turned and he saw me. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He excused himself from the conversation and walked toward me. I should have left. I should have turned and walked out the door. But I stood my ground. I wanted to see what he would do. He stopped a few feet away, respecting my space. He looked at me, then at the empty space beside me where Leo would be if he were there. He said my name, just Zara. No title, no pretense. I asked him what he was doing here. He said he was a sponsor. I asked him if he knew I would be here. He said no. He said he didn't know where I lived, that he had respected my silence. I told him I knew who he was. He nodded. He said he had wondered when I would find out. I asked him why he didn't tell me. He said that on the plane, he wasn't Elias Thorne, CEO, he was just a man. He said that if he had told me, I would have treated him differently. He said he wanted to be treated like a person, not a wallet. I listened. I wanted to believe him, but I asked him about the jet. I asked him if it was really broken. He said yes. He said he had the maintenance logs if I wanted to see them. He said he could prove anything I asked, but he didn't want to live in a world where he had to prove his integrity with paperwork. He said he understood my fear. He said he knew what power looked like to someone who didn't have it. He said he wasn't asking for anything. He was just saying hello. Then he stepped back. He told me he would be at the auction for the Children's Hospital Fund, and if I wanted to bid, he would match me. But he wouldn't approach me again unless I asked him to. He turned and walked away. I watched him go. I watched the way people moved out of his path, the way heads turned. He was a force of nature, but he had left me an out. He had given me the control. That night, I went home and I thought. I thought about the maintenance logs. I thought about the way he had looked at me, not with hunger, but with respect. I thought about the baby. I realized that my fear was protecting me from a risk that might not exist. I was letting my past dictate my future. I was letting the shadow of my father block out the sun. I decided I needed to know. I needed to see the logs. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed to trust myself. I needed to know that my judgment was sound. I emailed him the next day. I asked for the logs. I asked for the proof. It was a test. If he got angry, if he balked, I would know he was hiding something. If he sent them, I would know he had nothing to hide. He replied an hour later. He attached the documents. He attached the flight manifest. He attached a statement from the pilot. He attached everything. And he wrote a note. He said, "Trust is not given, it is built. I am willing to build it, brick by brick." I read that sentence 10 times. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't romantic. It was solid. It was the kind of promise a man makes when he intends to keep it. I called him. I didn't text. I called. He answered on the second ring. I told him I had received the files. I told him they looked authentic. He said they were. I told him I was sorry for the silence. He said he understood. I told him I wanted to meet, not at a gala, not in public. I wanted to meet where we could talk. He suggested a park. Neutral ground, open space, I agreed. We met 2 days later at Discovery Park. It was overcast, the air cool and salty. He was waiting by the trailhead. He was wearing jeans and a jacket, no suit. He looked smaller somehow, more human. We walked. We didn't hold hands, we didn't touch. We just walked. I told him about my father. I told him about the money, the control, the way love had been conditional. I told him why I had pulled away. I told him that I couldn't be with someone who held all the cards. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer to fix it. He just walked beside me. When I finished, he stopped. He turned to face me. He said that he understood better now. He said that he had money, but he didn't want it to be the definition of us. He said that he had been alone for a long time, surrounded by people who wanted something from him. He said that on the plane, for the first time in years, he had felt useful for who he was, not what he owned. He said that helping me had reminded him of his own humanity. He said he didn't want to buy my affection. He wanted to earn it. I looked at him. I searched his face for any sign of deceit. I found none. I found only a quiet determination. I asked him what he wanted. He said he wanted to know Leo. He wanted to know me. He wanted to see if we could build something real. I told him it would be slow. I told him I would check everything. I told him I wouldn't be intimidated. He smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen from him. He said he expected nothing less. We walked back to the cars. He didn't try to kiss me. He didn't try to drive me home. He just got in his car and waited until I was safely in mine before he drove away. That was the beginning. Not of a fairy tale, but of a negotiation. A relationship built on terms we both agreed to. Over the next few months, we took it slow. He came to my sister's house to meet Leo. He didn't bring gifts. He brought himself. He held the baby, he changed a diaper, he washed the bottles. He didn't have a staff do it. He did it himself. I watched him. I watched for the cracks. I watched for the arrogance. It didn't come. He was patient. He was consistent. When I had a panic attack about finances, he didn't offer to pay my bills. He sat with me and helped me budget. He showed me how to invest, how to secure my own future. He empowered me. He didn't save me. He gave me the tools to save myself. That was the difference. That was the truth I had been looking for. He wasn't trying to make me dependent. He was trying to make me equal. One evening, about 6 months after the plane, we were sitting on my sister's porch. Leo was asleep inside. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. I asked him why he really took the commercial flight. I knew about the jet, but I wondered if there was more. He looked out at the trees. He said he was tired. He said he was tired of the bubble. He said he wanted to feel the world again, even if it was uncomfortable. He said he wanted to remember what it felt like to be stuck in traffic, to wait in line, to be anonymous. He said that meeting me was the only good thing that had come from the breakdown, but he didn't plan it. He said some things are just luck. I leaned my head on his shoulder. It was the first time I had initiated contact. He didn't move, he just let me be there. I told him I was ready. I told him I trusted him. He asked me what that meant. I said it meant I was willing to be vulnerable. It meant I was willing to risk the pain because the possibility of love was worth it. He took my hand. His palm was warm. He said he would protect that trust. He said it was the most valuable thing I could give him. We stayed there until the stars came out. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about business. We talked about Leo's first steps. We talked about where we might live. We talked about the future like it was something we could build together, not something he would provide and I would accept. It was a partnership. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I felt like I was standing on solid ground. There were challenges, of course. There were always challenges. The public found out eventually. A paparazzi photo of us at the park. The headlines wrote themselves. Billionaire father of mystery baby. Single mom strikes gold. I hated it. I wanted to sue. I wanted to hide. Elias told me to let it go. He said we couldn't control the narrative, only our reaction. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't deny it. He just lived his life. He walked me to my car. He picked up Leo from daycare. He showed them that we were normal, that we were boring, that there was no story here except love. And eventually, the press lost interest. They moved on to the next scandal. We were left in peace. My sister asked me once if I ever regretted not taking the money. She meant the easy way out. She meant the life of luxury that was offered to me. I told her no. I told her that if I had taken the easy way, I would never have known if he loved me or just wanted to possess me. I told her that the struggle was necessary. It was the fire that burned away the impurities. It left us with something real. I look back on that flight sometimes. I think about the pain, the fear, the uncertainty. I think about the moment I looked at Elias and didn't know his name. There was a purity to that moment. We were just two humans in a metal tube dealing with the miracle of life. Everything else was noise. The wealth, the status, the power, it was all noise. The signal was the help. The signal was the kindness. I realized that I had spent so much time guarding myself against the world that I had almost missed the one person who was trying to get in. I had almost let my fear win, but I chose clarity. I chose to seek the truth rather than assume the worst. I chose to ask for the logs instead of walking away. I chose to have the conversation on the trail instead of hiding in my house. That choice made all the difference. It saved me from a lifetime of wondering what if. It saved me from a lifetime of bitterness. Now, when I look at Elias, I don't see the billionaire. I see the man who held my son. I see the man who waited for me to be ready. I see the man who respected my boundaries even when it was difficult for him. And when I look at Leo, I see the beginning of it all. I see the reason we met. I see the bridge between our worlds. We are building a life now. We bought a house together. Not a mansion, a home. It has a garden. It has a fence. It has a door that locks, but also a door that opens. We are careful with our money. We are careful with our hearts, but we are not afraid. I know now that trust is not a blind leap. It is a calculated risk. It is an investment. And like any good investment, it requires due diligence. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to walk away if the numbers don't add up. But when they do, when the truth aligns with the feeling, there is no greater return. I am 37 years old. I have a son. I have a partner. I have my own career. I have my own money. I am not defined by him. I am defined by me, and he is defined by him. And together, we are defined by us. That is the resolution. Not the wedding, not the bank account, but the equilibrium, the balance. I remember the day he proposed. It wasn't with a diamond the size of a grape. It was with a ring that fit my finger perfectly. He got it sized beforehand. He paid attention. He asked me in the kitchen while we were washing dishes. There was no music, there was no crowd. There was just the sound of running water and the smell of soap. He said, "I want to keep doing this. With you, for the rest of my life." I said yes. I didn't hesitate, because I knew the truth. I knew the man, and I knew that I was safe. Not because he could protect me from the world, but because he would stand beside me while I faced it. That is the only protection that matters. The flight was turbulence. The birth was pain. The misunderstanding was fear, but the landing was smooth. We are on the ground now, we are walking forward, and I am not looking back. I am not looking for the trap, I am looking at the path ahead. And he is walking there with me, hand in hand. Step by step, the story could have ended differently. It could have ended with a lawsuit. It could have ended with a scandal. It could have ended with me raising Leo alone, bitter and guarded. But it didn't, because I chose to be intelligent. I chose to be brave. I chose to verify before I vilified. And in doing so, I found not just a partner, but a piece that I thought was lost to me forever. I tell this story not to boast, but to remind myself. To remind myself that clarity is power. To remind myself that truth is the only foundation strong enough to hold a family. And to remind myself that sometimes, the person you need is sitting 2 rows ahead of you, waiting for you to let them help. You just have to be willing to ask who they really are. And then, you have to be willing to listen to the answer. Even when the answer changes everything, even when the answer scares you, especially then. Because on the other side of that fear is the life you were meant to live. I am living it now, every day, with every breath, with every step, and I am grateful, not for the money, not for the status, but for the truth, for the man who showed it to me, and for the courage it took to accept it. That is the story, that is the resolution, and it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. The seasons changed after that. Winter came to Seattle, bringing with it the gray skies and the relentless rain that I had once hated but now found comforting. It felt like a blanket, shielding us from the outside world. Elias and I settled into a rhythm. He worked long hours, as men in his position do, but he made time. He made time for the school runs, for the pediatrician appointments, for the quiet dinners where we didn't talk about work. We talked about books. We talked about the news. We talked about nothing. It was in the nothing that I found the most comfort. The absence of agenda, the absence of expectation. I continued to work. I refused to quit. He supported that. He never suggested I stay home. He never implied that my career was less important than his. He celebrated my promotions. He came to my office parties. He stood in the corner, holding a plastic cup of punch, talking to my colleagues about their projects, not his own. He blended in, he made an effort, and I saw how much that effort cost him. He was used to being the center of attention. He was used to people hanging on his every word. To be just another guest, to be just Zara's partner, that was a sacrifice. And he made it willingly. That told me more than any gift ever could. It told me that he valued my world as much as his own. He didn't want to absorb me into his. He wanted to meet me in the middle. There was a moment, about a year after we met, when we were driving back from a weekend trip to the coast. Leo was asleep in the back. The road was dark, winding through the trees. I was looking out the window, watching the headlights cut through the fog. I felt a sudden wave of anxiety. It hit me out of nowhere. What if this ends? What if he wakes up one day and realizes he can do better? What if I am just a phase? I know these thoughts are irrational. I know I am secure. But the old wounds don't heal overnight. They scar. And scars itch when the weather changes. Elias noticed. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just reached over and took my hand. He squeezed it. He said, "I'm not going anywhere." He didn't say it with drama. He said it like a fact. Like the sun will rise tomorrow. Like the tide will come in. I believed him, because he had proven it. He had proven it in the small things. The way he remembered how I took my coffee. The way he knew when I needed silence. The way he handled my sister's criticisms without getting defensive. He handled them with grace. He understood that she was protecting me. He didn't see her as an enemy. He saw her as an ally. That emotional intelligence was rare. It was the kind of thing you can't buy. You can't hire a consultant to teach you how to love someone's family. You have to feel it. You have to want it. And he wanted it. He wanted us. We started planning for the future. Not just the next month, but the next 10 years. We talked about college funds. We talked about retirement. We talked about growing old. It wasn't a fantasy. It was a plan. We wrote it down. We put it in a binder. It sounds unromantic, I know. But for me, romance is security. Romance is knowing that the person beside you is thinking about the same horizon. One evening, we were looking at houses. We found one in a neighborhood that was quiet, near a park. It wasn't an estate. It was a craftsman. It needed work. The roof needed fixing. The garden was overgrown. Elias looked at me. He asked what I thought. I said I loved it. He said then we'll buy it. He didn't say I'll buy it. He said we hired a contractor. We picked out the paint. We spent weekends sanding the floors. My hands were blistered. His were too. We ordered pizza and ate it on the bare subfloor. We laughed. We were tired. We were happy. That house became our home. It holds our memories now. It holds the marks of Leo's height on the doorframe. It holds the scratch on the table from when we moved the couch. It holds us. And every time I walk through the door, I feel a sense of peace that I never thought I would find. I know that life will have challenges. I know that money can complicate things. I know that power can corrupt. But I also know that we have built a firewall against that. We have built it with communication. We have built it with honesty. We check in with each other. We ask the hard questions. We don't let things fester. If I feel insecure, I say it. If he feels pressured, he says it. We deal with it. We deal with it together. That is the key. That is the secret. It isn't the wealth. It isn't the chance meeting on the plane. It is the work. It is the daily choice to trust. To choose trust over fear. To choose clarity over assumption. I think about the woman I was on that plane. She was scared. She was alone. She was trying to be strong. She is still here. But she is not alone anymore. She has support. She has love. She has a partner who sees her, really sees her. Not the mother, not the employee, not the girlfriend, just her, Zara, and that is enough. That is everything. I write this now, looking out the window of our home, watching the rain fall on the garden we planted. Leo is asleep. Elias is in the other room, reading. The house is quiet. It is safe. And I am full. Full of gratitude, full of hope. Full of life. The journey was long. The path was winding. But we are here, and we are staying. This is the resolution, not the end of the story, but the beginning of the real one. The one where we grow, the one where we learn, the one where we love. And I know, with every fiber of my being, that it will last, because it is built on truth. And truth is the only thing that endures. The rest is just noise. And we have learned to tune it out. We listen to each other. And that is the only sound that matters. The sound of understanding. The sound of home. I close my eyes and I listen. And I smile, because I know exactly where I am. And I know exactly who I am with. And that is all I need. That is all I will ever need. The turbulence is over. We have landed. And we are walking off the plane together. Into the light. Into the future. Hand in hand. Ready for whatever comes next. Because we are ready. We are ready.